might not be having a lot of room for it today, but we'll continue with it, and we'll help in the coming times if we are given that opportunity. But let me say that this bill that we have, without doubt, is a short bill, and you can actually tell, because the memorandum is also short, just to align it with the Constitution and perhaps provide for the ICT. But the question that begs for an answer is what becomes of all the other sections in the old bill. So what the colleagues are saying that we need a complete overhaul or a complete look at that bill or the act so that we are able to be confident with what we are doing is correct, and I want to support it. We said the same thing when we are dealing with the health bill, that bill was not doing justice to all the pieces of registration that we were making at the one blanket, because you don't feel like you have exercised your mind adequately on that. But again, we have to do what is before us. And what is before us is to support this bill on the SACCO, and we want to commend the committee that has brought before us. I want to say that I like the provisions that are in it. Every single day or every other month, we have new SACCOs being formed. It is the way of life in the rural areas, and it is only important, it's only fair that we are seen to give that part of our sector some attention. We have very many table banking groupings in our constituencies, and they have grown to the level that they would want to go to the next level. One of the levels they are going to is a SACCO. They are going to this cooperative movement. And it's important that we continue engaging ourselves and trying to help them to make sure that they grow. Some of us who are not very old will remember that back in the 80s and perhaps 90s, and more of it in the 80s and late 70s, there was a very strong movement, cooperative movement, and especially in the Mount Kenya region. But through some political, I think you call them political tsunamis that hit the area, all these cooperatives went under. And the way of life of people was completely disrupted. To date, some of them have never found a footing again. And it's because the cooperative movement then may have been interfered with politically, because there might not have been any regulatory framework that would have guarded the SACCOs and also shielded them from political interference. And this bill, among others that have been done before, goes a long way to ensuring that such maneuvers, political maneuvers, are not done in the coming days. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that comes out clearly for my attention is the Section 45, which talks about the qualification of external auditors. This helps to introduce professionalism in the way that these SACCOs are audited, ensuring that there is no insider trading, but also at the same time, creating a lot of employment for the young people back in the rural areas, because you now can be able to go and engage yourself fully from the first of the month to the end of the month just by doing audit of SACCOs in the rural areas. So it is a bill that we want, the procedure for revoking licenses and how it should be done, the way to apply for a license, and even the way to set or to limit the audited accounts. All of that covered in this bill help to improve the quality and the way of doing things within the SACCOs. And with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support and thank the committee for the work they have done, and encourage them and other committees that as members of CIOC, we are talking to all the ministries, Mr. Speaker, because implementation of the Constitution is really a wide thing. It covers every area. So any committee that fights their ministry coming before us, it is to help the country, not to take up their job. In any case, there's so much work to do in this country. You cannot finish it for the few months that you are here as a member of 12th Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
The Honorable Kioni, I don't envy you. You are Herculean task of heading that huge committee, constitutional implementation. And of course, you have said here today that the implementation of the Constitution is not a destination. It is a journey that we must journey through forever. Very well. Very well. The Honorable Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to make comment on this very important piece of legislation, bill, which is actually very small, but I end up speaking, Honorable Speaker, with my second voice, which is very, very low and very reasonable, because of late we have had about 3 bills just touching on the same issue of the cooperatives. And some of them do come like small amendments, but when you look deep inside them, they have a heavy weight with interests that are not necessarily for the cooperative movement. So I spend most of the time, Honorable Speaker, today just going through this particular bill and also consulting the very many stakeholders about it. And I want to thank the chairman because I also consulted him much earlier yesterday and today, and he assured me that this is not part of the many small legislations that are coming around with interests that are not for the cooperative movement. And indeed, I've confirmed that. I want to say the cooperative movement is a very important movement for the workers of Kenya, the teachers of Kenya, the civil servants of Kenya, the farmers, like Honorable Kioni has said. And Honorable Kioni, I want to assure you that for many years when we grew up, we admired the cooperative movement in your areas. But later on, they collapsed and we don't know what really happened. But I want to inform the House and Honorable Kioni that what used to happen in your areas is now happening in our area. There's a lot of mad rush, quick rush for formation of cooperatives. And the worrying is that we don't know if it can go the same direction you have almost alluded to. And therefore, it's very important that we make good laws. We make very good laws that can especially protect the people who invest in these cooperatives, especially when the cooperatives either are mismanaged or they cease to operate well, and the farmers, the people generally lose their benefits. Away from that, Honorable Speaker, I want to say, after looking at this particular bill, I noticed it was more of procedural issues, that one was dealing with the ICT introduction, which I fully support, because it will enhance efficiency in doing returns and also make sure that these cooperatives work efficiently. But I would want to also comment, and especially I'm happy the chair is back, that along the way, the first people who did cooperatives and the big circles we have in this country, and I come from a background of the teacher circles, which are the biggest in the country. Today, there are many other small circles like the border circles and the matatu circles. I hope that in so doing and introducing the ICT systems in filing reports and doing returns, we shall not completely disadvantage the young ones that are upcoming and are keen also in just making the first step towards developing the cooperative movement in their own areas, like I said earlier. I also want to say, Honorable Speaker, that I also noticed that a lot of the amendments in this particular bill was more of housekeeping elements, touching on the issues of minister and replacing them with CSS. In other places, I noticed clearly it was aligning them with the county government because it was clear that they were still using the local authority instead of the county assemblies. Honorable Speaker, there was also the issue of the Controller and Auditor General, which I think was very well touched by the mover of the motion, and so well so. And therefore, it is a good bill generally for the cooperatives, and therefore, I would want to support it. I also noticed typos when you write the word cooperative, but I think the clerk's office will deal with that because there's a way it's written, and here the typos are clearly could clearly be seen. But then moving forward, and especially that now the chair is here, I noticed that on that clause where we are looking at how to make sure that the cooperatives are managed well, and which I fully support, so that we are able to even size the licenses of the cooperatives that are being mismanaged. If a SACCO is being mismanaged, and therefore we withdraw its license, I did not think that there's need completely to close down the cooperative, because many of the SACCOs begin as cooperatives, savings cooperatives. And then later on, when they grow bigger, they introduce what is called the SACCO or the front office. So if the front office fail, which may fail because of several reasons, which I've also had a number of honorable members make mention, like simple remittance.
Member for Kigumo. Gary,
Yes.
just come. Yes, you can use that one.
Okay, thank you.
That one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to support the SACCO Society Amendment Bill number 18 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, the very essence of this bill is to allow for efficiency, to ensure that we institute accurate reporting as the memorandum, the activities of the SACCO. Mr. Speaker, as my colleagues have observed, the SACCO movement has, for a long time, instituted within the Kenyan society a country cannot grow its wealth unless we move not just from CASA has grown in width and bound because they may call it a different name, but actually is the SACCO movement. Savings that are usually put in our SACCOs are for ordinary Kenyans. We want to create wealth that we represent in this and feel even unless it's able to accumulate wealth at the very base where the majority of the people are in the rural areas through such organized institutions like the SACCO. So this bill, then, Mr. Speaker, could not have come at a better time, and that's why I rise to support it. I also want to join the members that have actually said it should have been more comprehensive than it is. And we do hope that that will be looked into and will be brought a more comprehensive bill to the House, although already of an integrated filing system, automated filing system, people, and thereby allow reducing the errors that, human errors that come around, and that, the Speaker. So for me, I would want to encourage the committee that was looking into this, look at it more holistically and bring us a more comprehensive bill that will look into all the operation and ensure are protected and they are efficiently managed. In terms of the filing, the efficiency to create and reducing risks, because when you're looking at money and issues relating to funds, you must be concerned with risk management. So instituting e-filing or computerized filings of documents and reporting to the authority that this bill seeks to institute will also create efficiency, will reduce malpractices in our SACCO system, and create more hope and help the members, have much more faith in managing their SACCOs. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to, with those few remarks, join those who have talked ahead of me to support this bill and to seek that even a more comprehensive one be done. They've talked about even issues like auditing. Previously, the SACCOs were doing their own auditing and appointing their own auditors without a streamlined method or procedure of auditing. I have seen in this bill now registering auditors who must meet for which, because it sets the four walls within which the SACCOs must then operate. So, Mr. Speaker, I also want to support what Honorable Kioni talked about, asking our government agencies to remove 2010 that demands that all the laws and regulations that govern our institutions, they relook at all their laws and the regulation. This is I beg to support. Thank you.
Member for Tesono. Just before you start your submission, I wish to notify members that I have received communication from the ICT people that the delivery from the mics for members is not very clear for recordal purposes. I'll therefore direct that from now onwards, our members come to make their delivery from the dispatch box, starting with the Honorable Oku Kaunya.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity. I stand to support the SACCO Societies Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2018. I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, for two main reasons. Mr. Speaker, the issue of introducing ICT will bring efficiency and effectiveness in terms of reporting. And not only on reporting, but also in sharing information, which can be available to both members and other organizations that are interested in the SACCOs. This in itself will promote and increase trust among the members. Because one of the things that has let down a number of SACCOs is where information is not shared and it becomes difficult for members to understand, particularly where management of SACCOs goes down, Mr. Speaker. Some SACCOs have failed simply because information is not available to the members as how it is progressing. And introducing ICT will go a long way in improving that sharing of information and the confidence or trust the members will have. Apart from that, this ICT, I do believe, though the bill may not have gone further. I believe that with the inclusion of what we know currently, some of the small savers, Mr. Speaker, sir, like the borders, are those in the informal sector, already make savings. If this ICT use of the mobile or electronic is extended to the mobile money business, where even the savers can actually save from the grassroots, I think this will expand the base, and also it will make it much cheaper for savers to do. Mr. Speaker, I've seen a few of these circles, like the border circles, in some areas are already using the mobile money system linked with the banks, like Equity, for example. I've seen them utilizing that system. They save from home. They don't have to have that money transmitted, or they don't have to go to the bank, Mr. Speaker, and therefore it saves them the cost of moving to where bank branches are. So I think the introduction of ICT generally should actually encompass even other sectors. The second reason I support this bill is a question of, in terms of SACCOs, for us to expand SACCO societies, Mr. Speaker, it will increase the available amount of money to the public, the available amount of money for business, but at a low cost of interest. Because most SACCOs, Mr. Speaker, as you realize, charge very low amount of interest even to the members in terms of acquiring, for example, the loans. So with this, we believe that even the cost of loans will go down as long as we'll have a greater base in terms of coverage. So this particular bill will help in enhancing resource mobilization through these SACCOs. And we believe that even the filing system itself will make it easier for government to monitor, and also for other institutions that they are interested in SACCO performances. For example, those who may be interested in funding or supporting the growth of SACCOs, Mr. Speaker, they will easily access those records, and therefore it will help in enhancing the sector. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
We shall proceed in this manner. We shall have the Honorable who look for order, followed by the Honorable Abele Malimo, and then we shall have the mover to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this proposed amendment. The SACCO Societies Amendment Bill 2018, which I support. I would like to start by thanking the Chairman and members of Finance and National Planning Committee for these proposed amendments. Mr. Speaker, as earlier speakers have said, looking at the memorandum on these proposed amendments, most of the amendments are basically aimed at aligning the old act or the principal act with provisions of our new constitution. And I would like to reiterate what the chairman of Constitution Implementation Oversight Committee Chair said, that there exist many legislations which are not yet aligned with the provisions of new constitutions, which still makes reference to ministers, still makes reference to local authorities, and so on and so forth. Mr. Speaker, as I support these amendments, proposed amendments, it is important for us to appreciate that SACCO societies have played a very important role in economic development of our country, especially in enabling our rural population and the workers of Kenya, those in public service and private sector, to pull together their savings and therefore through their cooperatives to access affordable financial services. Actually, the role of SACCO societies is appreciated by our Blueprint Vision 2030, in terms of its role in deepening financial access, in mobilizing savings, and also in enabling investments in enterprises and also investments for personal development for members of various SACCOs. Looking at the specifics on the proposed amendments, I specifically want to talk about this Section 51 of the Principal Act, which is proposed to be amended. If you look at the provision of that section, what is provided for in that Principal Act, it relates to role of the authority in terms of its supervisory work as well as enforcement of action at times when the SACCO societies violate provisions of the Principal Act as well as other regulations which are put in place to regulate the businesses of SACCO societies. Now, the proposed amendment under Section 51 of the Principal Act under Section 7, Article 51 M, it relates to imposition of financial penalty on the society. But, Mr. Speaker, we know that these societies are run by directors. They are also run by people who are employed by these directors to manage the savings of Kenyans. And therefore, if we stop at what was provided for under the old act, where the imposition of financial penalty is stopped at, the society as an institution, I think that's not fair. And therefore, the proposed amendment is quite in order. It goes beyond imposition of financial penalty on the society and talks about also doing the same on directors who, under whose watch, the violation of the provisions of the Societies Act has taken place, and therefore putting the savings of Kenyans in jeopardy. And therefore, I see that as a very important thing. We have seen cooperative societies fall, hard-earned savings of Kenyans being squandered by people who have been entrusted by members to manage their savings and so on and so forth. And therefore, this proposed amendment is going to tighten regulation of the savings. It's also going to discourage. It's going to act as a deterrence for the directors and also for the employees of SACCO societies not to violate, in the process of conducting businesses, not to violate provisions of the SACCO Society Act and other regulations which are in place to guide operation of the SACCO societies. I would like also to appreciate the importance of use of ICT in filing returns. We realize that the manual way of filing returns is cumbersome in terms of, receiving this in a central registry, and sometimes it's difficult for regulatory authorities to establish, the financial health of the thousands and thousands of SACCO societies which are registered to operate across our country. And therefore, I feel that the use of ICT to facilitate electronic filing of the returns is going to improve efficiency. It's also going to help the regulatory authority to identify those SACCOs which probably are not performing well, and therefore institute measures to prevent them from going under. With those few remarks, I support the proposed amendments.
Well, I will follow as the Speaker had directed. Next is Honorable Albert Malimo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this amendment bill, the SACCO Societies Bill of the National Assembly, number 18 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, cooperative societies contribute so much to the economy of this country due to the fact that they play an integral role to promote those Kenyans who really earn very meager salaries, who actually be able to come together in order to put their savings in one basket. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the country today, from in the olden days, when only big banks used to have monopoly in the industry, of the banking industry. And therefore, you will find that quite a number of Kenyans were cut out from actually, because by the time you are required to even register, even to open a bank account, you are told to produce this and this. So the process is made very cumbersome. However, in the introduction of these cooperative societies, for instance, like Kenya Police Service have their members, and therefore they decided to have a cooperative society to take care of their financial management so that members will be able to save their savings there, and eventually they will be able to have, they will be able to have their payment and retirement benefits. At least by the time somebody is retiring, he will be able to have something for himself, having saved. They can also be able to access loans. So, Mr. Speaker, currently we really have quite a number of circles throughout the country who take care of different parastatals. Even we have walimu, even teachers and all that. And that is actually a good sign that people are really trusting these cooperative societies, and it's really helping our people. However, Mr. Speaker, on the side of management of these cooperative societies, you will realize that some cooperatives, they don't have quite a good structure to run these cooperative societies. Simply because somebody might have realized that there's an opportunity here, and he will end up, being appointed as the chair or even the director of that particular cooperative society, and he will have his wife and even his relatives, and eventually, just like we have seen in the past, that some banks, financial institutions like banks, we have seen the banks which have gone under, and the directors happen to take away hard-earned Kenyan money, money from which has been contributed by Kenyan citizens, their hard-earned money, and somebody runs away. So it becomes very difficult for even for the for the members even to pursue, even for that person to be arrested. So it becomes really a very big, it becomes a mess that that person cannot be able to be held accountable for whatever mismanagement he has caused. So, Mr. Speaker, this proposed amendment, I think it has come at the right time to safeguard, to cushion Kenyan citizens who happen to contribute their money into these cooperative societies, and therefore I think it is really at the right time. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the amendment. Thank you.
Very well. Honorable, is it Honorable Dirango? Yes, please. You have the opportunity to reply.
Mr. Speaker, in replying, I wish to thank both the Committee of Trade, Industrialization and Cooperatives and my own Committee of Planning and Finance for together working collectively to ensure that this bill comes to right. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank all members who have participated in giving their expert views on this bill, Mr. Speaker. It is important to note that quite a number of members here, like the member for Moro, the Honorable Makari Muru, and other members are experts in SACCO development, and they have given very important contributions. Right here in the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, most of our members of Parliament here are also members of PACOSO and Bukoso, and we know the critical part they play in
availing finance to members to develop themselves and to undertake their personal project. Mr. Speaker, there is a clear correlationship between governance, democratic governance, and the operation of cooperatives. Looking around, Mr. Speaker, you see that today, since the new constitution took root, Mr. Speaker, that the government has been trying to create laws and to develop values along the propagation of circle societies. As opposed, Mr. Speaker, to the earlier rule of 1980 and the early 1990, when important cooperatives in this country, particularly in central Kenya, were politically undermined and influenced through the office of the Commissioner of Cooperatives then. Mr. Speaker, I have in mind land-buying cooperatives like Nyakenyua, Kehiumwere, Boy Committee, and even very strong banks, Mr. Speaker, that were based on cooperative development, like the former Rural Urban, which was headed by Andrew Goba, Jiba Bank, the former Continental Bank, headed by, among other directors, Kibaki, Akiba Bank, Consolidated Bank. Mr. Speaker, because of bad governance and dictatorship and political manipulation in the management of these companies and cooperatives, they all went under, leading to a lot of desperation among farmers and ordinary Kenyans, particularly in Nairobi, Eastern and Central Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, we want to thank the parent Ministry of Trade and Industrialization for also coming up with a policy to firm up values around the management of SACCOs so that they can be able to serve Kenyans prudently and in the deployment of ICT to manage their reporting, monitoring, record keeping, etc. Mr. Speaker, the archaic system of managing cooperatives is cumbersome and leads to a lot of wastage. So, Mr. Speaker, we look forward to the implementation of this bill so that deployment of ICT can improve the management of SACCOs to bring transparency and accountability. It is also true, Mr. Speaker, that even in this time of ICT, there are many cooperatives out there who are luring members of the diaspora to invest, particularly in land-buying companies. But when you look critically at them, Mr. Speaker, you find that they have invested nothing in ICT. It is important prospective investors, particularly locally and from the diaspora, who want to invest in land-buying companies, to take time to peruse their books, to seek information about the management of these SACCOs. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank our new Minister in Cooperatives, our Honorable Governor Munya, who has taken up the helm at that ministry for also ensuring that together with Parliament, these rules and bill come to bear. With those words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply, and without the risk of preempting you, Mr. Speaker, to seek your indulgence in invoking Rule 53.3 to defer the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Honourable Member, that is noted. We shall ped putting the question until we have the required threshold numbers. Next order.
Order number 14, the Insurance Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21 of 2018. Second reading.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. Honourable Imo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I stand to transact the Insurance Amendment Bill 2018, Mr. Speaker, I want to request you and indulge you that this particular bill be stood down until next week, because I received information from the National Treasury that there is some information which needs to be given to us before we move this bill. Mr. Speaker, I ask you to stood down to next week.
Very well, that is stepped down until next week or that other time that the House Business Committee sorts the business again. Next order.
Order number 15, the Assumption of Office of the County Governor Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018. Second reading.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security. And shall I request you, Honourable Chair, to use the dispatch box so that then there isn't the interruption of recording.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, the Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security wish to table a report on the committee's proceedings during the consideration of the assumption of the office of the County Governor Bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018. Honourable Speaker, the committee wishes to commend the Senate for coming up with the assumption of the office of the County Governor Bill, which seeks to fill a gap in the law on how governor-elect or respective counties assume office. The proposed bill also provides for the establishment of an assumption of office of Governor Committee that will ensure that there is a smooth transition where a new governor is elected. Honourable Speaker, in consideration of the bill, the committee has made outstanding amendments to the bill and shall be laying the same in the House at the opportune time. The committee made recommendations as indicated in the report that, 1, there is need to define who a county officer is for clarity purposes, because there is a confusion between a county officer and a public officer. Secondly, there is a need to include the Ministry of Devolution in the assumption of office, the Governors Committee, since that is the ministry responsible for the matters related to the devolution and also offers technical assistance to the counties. Thirdly, Honourable Speaker, there is a need to provide for an instance where a speaker assumes office as an acting governor as per the provisions of Article 182 in bracket 5 of the Constitution. And fourthly, Honourable Speaker, there is a need to provide for a time frame within which a speaker of a county assembly shall assume office as a governor, where vacancy occurs in the office of the governor and the deputy governor. All these issues highlighted, Honorable Speaker, shall be brought by the committee as amendment to the bill. And Honorable Speaker, I believe when these amendments are implemented, they will bring soberness in the county government and also remove the madness that we have been seeing in the county government. We wish to thank the office of the Honorable Speaker and the clerk for facilitating the committee in discharging the mandate. Honorable Speaker, with this I beg to move the report and call upon Honorable Kaunya to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Kaunya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand to second this Senate Bill number 1 of 2018, the Assumption of Office of the County Governor Bill. This particular bill, as our chairman, the National Administration and Security Committee has indicated, is meant to provide for a procedure for assumption of office of governor and to provide for the ceremonies surrounding it. But basically, the bill is timely, and the bill takes cue from the assumption of office of the president, which is in the Constitution. There were gaps in terms of assumption of office of the governor, and I think this is the main reason why the bill was brought. And we have proposed those amendments already mentioned by the chair, and we believe this should make the process smooth. We should have a smooth process from which the governor takes over when elected. There are, for example, gaps that are sought to be filled in this process. For example, limiting or specifying the time that is required for assumption. Because in the previous case, it was open. It could take so long. And then secondly, also limiting the reporting. When the committee, when the governor takes over, there's always that accountability process from the previous government or the previous governor to the current. There are provisions now that provide for a report to be submitted within a specified time. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second. Thank you.
Honorable members, pose a question that the assumption of office of the county governor bill, Senate Bill number 1 of 2018, be now read a second time. A number of members have raised the interest to speak to this. Top on the list is Honorable Akol. That member has walked, and it is an interest to speak, and left. Honorable Akol, the next in the queue is the member speaking now, offline. Honorable Jeremiah Kioni, member for Daragwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me an opportunity to contribute to this very important bill once again. This is a familiar position. This is where everybody used to speak from during 10th Parliament before we created the cubicles that we all have now. But Mr. Speaker, this is yet another of the bills that is going a long way in implementing our Constitution of 2010. And we want to commend the Senate for the initiative they took. We also want to commend our own committee, led by the able chair, for working on it speedily and allowing us time to debate it and input on its enactment. Mr. Speaker, the issue of assumption of office by the governor is not anything that is new to Kenyans. We all know, including your own county, how this was chaotic, and it is only fair that we provide some order within it, and the bill has helped a long way. It's gone quite some distance to try and sort out the difficulties that were there. One of the things that is clear is that during the assumption of office of the governors, because we had it for the first time, I think this year, was a scenario where the governor who was leaving office, or the governor who was assuming office, was faced with a committee that was trying to help him assume office, and top of the list of those people who were in the committee are those who were campaigning against him. And for the reason that there was no way of identifying, nothing had been provided for, and a person would sit in an office and arbitrarily decide on how to conduct the assumption of office. Now we have a bill that we are confident will become an act of parliament that helps sort out that mess. I think the other thing, Mr. Speaker, that I think is crucial in line with that is that I am hoping that there will be a criteria for the persons who will be in those committees, so that again we don't have people who have just walked in and may not be very useful. But since they are the ones who have just walked in last, are given the opportunity to do so. We need a criteria that clearly represents offices. It is good to note that the amendments are seeking to bring in the office of the minister or the CS as we know them today, so that there is some order and there is some clarity in the way that we handle that issue. The other thing that I hope we will be able to deal with is that the budget for the assumption of office can also be provided for, even if perhaps not in a definite manner, so that we avoid what again we saw during the assumption of office. We had people spending 2, 4, 5, 10 million shillings, while others were spending 200,000 shillings. It will be good to ensure that there is, even if not a specific figure, there is a capping, so that you don't give the Kenyans an impression that another router has been sworn in or has taken charge of the territory. A handing over procedure, even as the governor assumes office, Mr. Speaker, I think it's also important to provide in some form that how do you hand over? As it is now, and it is the case also with our own offices, it's like you walk into an office where people took off in a hurry, either left some papers under the table or left with everything. I think it is important that some handing over procedures, even if not, it may not be possible for the governor whom you defeated or was defeated to walk in and hand over. You need to be very mature politically. But an officer in his own office who is accountable to the people should be made to hand over, and specific documents that are useful in handing over be included. The role of the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, a very important inclusion in this bill. I know that our Speaker has been a Speaker of the County Assembly, and I'm sure at one point he must have seen himself having the potential of taking over as a governor. But it would have been a disaster then, because there was no clear way of doing it. Now we have a bill that should clarify and make it very clear when a Speaker takes over for this period of time. And I would suggest also, Mr. Speaker, that even the duties or the responsibilities that he can fulfill during that time be very clear, So that you remember when we had the presidential rerun and we had a presidential elect who then became the president because we were back to where we were. There are specific things that the Constitution was curtailing him from doing. We need to be careful and clear what is it that the Speaker can do during that time when we are looking for a governor, so that he doesn't become a governor who may just want to shape the county in a manner that he runs it when he is the Speaker, because when he is acting as the governor, he is still certain of being the Speaker once the governor comes into office. And with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for that opportunity and say that as we continue thinking through this bill and the law of the governors and the devolution, I think we also need to encourage ourselves to understand again that what we were devolving was never political power. I think now we can be able to talk about these things more boldly and in an agreeable manner. When we were doing the Constitution, there was a pull and push because people were looking for political power. And we now can see the damage that can be there if you devolve political power to the governor. It is even detrimental to you as a member of parliament. But we wanted to have economic devolution. We devolve units that would help us spur growth of economic, spur some economic growth in our country. And we can tell 1 or 2, 3 counties may already be looking like they are generating some economic activities from where they are. So any registration that we do, in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, should be aimed at helping the governors realize the law that we want. We want them to grow employment from the counties. We want to see a number of the counties, what we are experiencing is unnecessary political competition, unnecessary quarreling, and in the process, really just stagnating growth, and we mark time for another 5 years, which is not useful at all, to a point where, for example, like today, if you ask many of the counties, including where I come from, they will be wanting to tell you, take back this health sector to the national government. Why? Is because the governors have not spent time dealing with the issues that they needed to deal with from the beginning. And so as we continue debating these issues, we need to address ourselves, including an issue that we may have alluded to yesterday, including why is it that we were having nominated members to the county assembly and providing for their way of occupying space in those assemblies in the Constitution. It was not for them to be grouped together by the governor and they become a whip against the people who voted. It's because they were supposed to help in actualizing those issues that affect people more, like water, health. There are things that help affect people on a regular basis. And we thought in making the Constitution that if we nominate more women at the county assembly level, they will remember the issues that our ladies go through and are suffering from every day. What we are now seeing today is that the first point of call is the governor's office, and they form themselves into a caucus that is then used by the governor to do things that more often than not don't benefit the people who elected the MCs. And let me say this for purposes of clarity. When the governor takes the nominated MCAs and forms them into a group, adds another 5 or 10 who had been elected, he has enough assembly to run the county against the wishes of the many, because those who were voted for will not have a voice in that assembly. So as we continue thinking through of how we nominate people to assembly, you cannot allow a nominated person to come and take up a position contrary to that which, you cannot allow a nominated person to even have more power than the person who was given the votes by the people. I think it's a backdoor way of running our country, and we will not achieve what we intended to achieve when we gave ourselves the new Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Next is Honorable Dr. Makari Mungu, member for Kitui Central.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to give my input into this bill
And Mr. Speaker, let me also declare that I'm a member of the committee, of this committee, the Committee on Administration and National Security. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important we thank the Senate for this bill. And as we have always been saying, Mr. Speaker, the reason why the Senate was actually created as a house of this parliament is to be able to serve the interest of the county governments and the county assemblies. And when I see a bill like this, Mr. Speaker, we start appreciating the importance of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, this bill, as it has been said by the mover and the seconder, is supposed to provide the procedures on how to assume office once a governor is elected. And Mr. Speaker, we must realize at any point when we conduct elections, there will be the sitting governor and the governor will be elected. There are cases where the sitting governor will win his seat and continue the second term. And there are cases where the governor who is sitting will lose and you have a new person coming in. And I think the importance of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to be able to manage the two scenarios. So that in our case, and more so the scenario whereby a sitting governor has lost an election and we have a new one who is coming. Because if we don't have a clear legal framework, Mr. Speaker, the sitting governor who has lost the election can make life very difficult for the one who has been elected, and settling of the new governor could be a big issue. So that's the importance of this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I would just want to assure Honorable Keoni that what he was raising while making his contribution has been adequately provided in this bill. When you look at clause 5 of this bill, Ms. Honorable Keoni and other members, it is clearly stated who will sit in this committee, which has been set up, and this committee will be titled Establishment of Assumption of the Office of the Governor Committee. There is a committee which has been set up now in law. And when you look at the composition of this committee in terms of membership, Mr. Speaker, the county secretary is number 1. Why is the county secretary number 1? Because county secretary is a civil servant. By expectation, he is not supposed to play any politics. So him being a neutral person, he is supposed to oversee that transition in case a governor loses an election. Then there's the issue of the officer in charge of legal matters in the county. I imagine that's the person who is advising the county in terms of legal matters. The chief officer in the department responsible for matters, county public officer, that's now the public service of the county. The chief officer responsible for matters relating to information and communication. Chief officer, department responsible for finance. Chief officer in the department responsible for matters relating to culture and social services. County commissioner, who is now from the national government. So you see now we are bringing the national government into the whole arrangement so that even the national government is represented. Then we have a representative of the National Intelligence Service, which is critical, a representative of the National Police Service, clerk of the county assembly, another important arm of the county government, then a representative from the judiciary, and 2 persons, 1 man and woman from, nominated by the governor-elect. So we'll have 2 people who the governor-elect will be able to appoint, a man and a woman, to make sure that even as this committee sits, then the particular interest of the governor-elect are mainstreamed into the whole arrangement. And that's what this proposal of the committee is, as we move forward, as we go to the third reading, Mr. Speaker, we'll be bringing on board a representative from the Ministry of Devolution, because it's one overseeing county governments. So that even as this committee sits, then we have somebody from that ministry to make sure that from the word go, things are well organized as we move forward, Mr. Speaker. And that's why to me this is very important, because initially, as Honorable Keoni was saying, you could find that a team could just come and decide to frustrate the governor-elect, and will never settle and waste a lot of time instead of implementing. That's that one area, Mr. Speaker, I thought it's important I mentioned. The other bit which is important in this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that in addition to the committee being formed, it is very clear what the committee is expected to do in terms of outputs. We are saying when this committee is formed, these are the expected outputs which will be given to the governor-elect. We are saying one of them, when the governor-elect assumes office, this committee is expected to cease immediately the governor takes office, is supposed to have an up-to-date assets register of the government. It's expected to have an updated register of liabilities, so that it's clear what is owed to the county government. It's to have a complete list of all bank accounts and reconciled balances, so that these things are in place. It's supposed to also have a report of all staff establishment per department. It's supposed to have a comprehensive report on county entities or corporations or agencies containing information which is as listed above, Mr. Speaker. And then they're also supposed to have an updated report on all pending legal cases, so that when this committee, and then last there's county source of funding, in case where the county government has other sources other than the central government and their own revenue generation, they're supposed to indicate which are those other sources, so that when the governor-elect settles and he has all these reports, very quickly they can settle and start working. And then the other good thing with this committee is, during the interim time, when you have a governor-elect and a governor who has lost election, this committee is supposed to facilitate smooth communication between the two. You know, at times they don't see eye to eye. So this committee could visit the governor-elect, hear the side of the story, and go to the governor who has lost, hear the story, and then see how they can, that's smooth communication, so that county activities do not suffer as a result of that. So the bill makes provision for that, Mr. Speaker, and I think that's quite important. The other thing which is also is provided for here is the governor-elect, once declared as a winner, is supposed to be provided with security. We know this country, people have suffered after you are elected. If you don't have adequate security, Mr. Speaker, you can easily be targeted and things go wrong. So this bill provides for that they will make sure that this committee will make sure that the governor-elect is provided with adequate security for the period before he is actually sworn in. In that case, things are okay. The other good thing with this bill is also that in a case, Mr. Speaker, where the governor comes in, it says in case the governor is not able to assume office, then there's a clear provision of how the deputy governor assumes office. In case where the governor and the deputy governor are not able to assume office, it is clearly provided for here in Speaker how the Speaker of the County Assembly assumes office. And one of the things we are discussing as a committee is that in a case where the Speaker of the County Assembly assumes office on a temporary kind of arrangement before elections are conducted, we're asking ourselves, what happens if the county speaker is also interested in contesting as a governor in case that allows? So that's something we need to think through, and I think it doesn't come out clear in the bill, Mr. Speaker. And I think as we move forward, the House and the Senate should think what happens. Because a speaker might also be interested in becoming the governor. In case the deputy governor and the governor are not there, and there is a free election, then the speaker might decide, I want also to become a governor, which means that time then, who assumes office? And these are some of the issues we need to address so that we don't have gaps which could cause issues, which can cause issues. The other important clause is clause 13. And what this clause does, Mr. Speaker, it addresses the issue of handing over of instruments of power. You know, every government has what we call instruments of power. This includes the flag, it includes the coat of arms, the constitution, and the seal. And what we are saying, Mr. Speaker, is at times we have seen governors who, because I've lost the election as a governor, I might not be there to present these things to the governor-elect. Because at that time there is almost a lot of differences and feeling like you are being unfair to me. And more in areas where people are thinking of going to court to petition. They may not want even to go to the governor-elect and hand over. So we are saying where that happens, Mr. Speaker, the county secretary being the civil servant then should be able to undertake that assignment. Make sure that instruments of power are handed over to the governor-elect. So to me, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the good things which are coming from this bill, and things which I think as we move forward, if we support them, it will help. I can see I'm being warned. In terms of funding, Honorable Keon, what we have said is each county government should be able to budget, to come up with a reasonable budget for this ceremony. But we have seen a lot of wastage, I agree with you. And I think what would be, once you bring the Ministry of Devolution, then they could come up with some range of figures that you can be within this range, the lowest and the highest, so that people don't take these ceremonies as a way of misuse of public resources. Well. So with those remarks, Speaker, I support.
Very well. Next is Honorable, to my right is Honorable Kimani Kuria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute to this Assumption of Office County Governors Bill of 2018. Mr. Speaker, in 2010, we voted in for a new constitution. And this legislation shows us that we are serious in the implementation of this constitution. And to quote Honorable Kioni that said that the implementation of the constitution is not a one-day thing, but could be something that could do in a lifetime, and including passing pieces of legislation to support the implementation of this constitution. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at the second schedule that gives the format for county information that should be available and should be handed over to the new governor, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the list of the assets and the list of liabilities and reconciled bank accounts of the county, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking at very important data of the county staff establishment per department. Mr. Speaker, we've had an issue of county staff, especially during the handover, where every new governor that comes, almost every new governor that has got into office, the first thing they did was to do a staff audit of the employees of that county. And Mr. Speaker, as a result, we are losing competent staff in our government and especially in our counties, because professionals, accountants, doctors, architects, engineers, they have taken county jobs as something that they do only during the term of that governor, Mr. Speaker. And as a result, when the new governor comes in, most of them attempted to get, and most of the time succeed to get rid of all the employees, of nearly all the employees that have been serving that county government and bring in their own employees, Mr. Speaker. And this has jeopardized the quality of service in our counties. We need to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that our counties are going concern. We don't have a county government of Nakuru for 5 years and another county government for another 5 years. These are county governments that continue in perpetuity as a going concern, irrespective of who serves in the office. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, these pieces of legislation that recognizes this and enacts this into law will continue to make sure that this is sustained, Mr. Speaker. I'm also looking at one of the clauses that says that the county executive officers in the counties should pass legislation at their counties to enable this act and to add provisions so that they give meat that could be, say, tailor-made to these particular counties, Mr. Speaker. And this, if taken seriously by our members of county assembly, by our county executive officers, will ensure that smooth running of our counties, Mr. Speaker. We, with the enactment of the new constitution, we created 47 governments. And as a result, we created 47, we created different, if you take, for example, the issue of water, we ended up with 47 ministries of water, which therefore, Mr. Speaker, tells us, as maybe as a house, we need to come back and find out those functions that got devolved. Why do we continue to hold parent ministries at the national government? If, for example, we have a ministry of water in all the 47 counties, and we say that in our constitution that water is a devolved function, why do we still continue to have a ministry of water at the national government? And sometimes, when you go through these counties or even our constituencies, they are not even a single project that is supposed to be done by the national government. And therefore, I'm tempted, Mr. Speaker, to believe that most of the wastages that we have in our wage bill, in our country, is mainly in the executive, and especially in the duplication of these roles. If Ministry of Health, Mr. Speaker, and it's not if, Ministry of Health is devolved. So we have 47 ministries of health across the 47 counties. And yet, we still have a Ministry of Health at the national government. And how many ministries do they have? Talk about water. We're talking about water. We're talking about health. We're talking about land. So maybe we need to collapse these ministries at the national level to probably a coordination ministry so that we avoid this duplication of resources and bring down the wastages that we see in duplication of roles between the national government and the county government. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I support this bill.
Honorable Nakara Lodepe, member for Turkana Central.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice on this bill. First of all, Honorable Speaker, I would like to thank the Senate for taking their time to come up with this bill so that we cannot have confusion in handing over during the incoming and outgoing governor. Honorable Speaker, the committee, the other committee that will take over to organize the assumption of the office, there's an issue that's very sensitive, Honorable Speaker, the issue of gender. Honorable Speaker, most of the people who have been appointed as chief officers, most of them are men. Honorable Speaker, including the county commission and others. I was suggesting, Honorable Speaker, maybe in the future, we need to be clear on the gender and also a disabled group, so that, Honorable Speaker, we will not have a one gender committee doing this work. So, Honorable Speaker, I would like the chairman to take note of that, so that we can have a gender-sensitive committee to run over, so that they can bring the experiences and also their issues during that period. Honorable Speaker, another issue that I would like to bring to attention is number 5, where it says that the members referred to in subsection 2.1 shall be nominated upon the declaration of the final result of the election of the governor. Honorable Speaker, sometimes we have a petition. Sometimes we have a petition, and if this will be declared before the petition has been declared or cleared, what will happen, Honorable Speaker? Because sometimes people rush to court to stop the swearing or to stop the handing over. So maybe we need to see how that process can be done, or we need to make sure that the court gives ruling immediately, because sometimes the court takes time before giving the ruling, and whoever will be given the office, he will assume. And once he gets to the office, Honorable Speaker, he will now use the resources of the public to fight the battle. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it's good to see if everything is cleared. Let's give a period of time so that we don't have the petition, we don't have any dispute. Then we declare the members who are going to be formed eligible to continue with their work. So I don't know how we can address that one, Honorable Speaker, but I want the chairman to take note of that, because sometimes we have legal issues that come after election, and some members want to stop the swearing and also assumption of the office. Honorable Speaker, another issue that I want to bring over is about the handing over. Should be actually said very clearly, because, Honorable Speaker, the property that the county government has belongs to the public. I can highlight the case of Tarakanithi, whereby a big generator, which costs a lot of money, disappeared immediately. The new governor came in. So, Honorable Speaker, we need to see how we can safeguard the properties of the public during that period of handing over. We should make sure that immediately after election, we protect the properties, because sometimes those who are already in power take that period to take away some properties from their offices and assume belong to them. So, Madam Honorable Speaker, we need to address that issue, that immediately or during election period, we shall have a committee to take all the records of all the properties of the county government, so that in case the sitting governor will lose, will not come back again and take those who are not recorded. So that one, Honorable Speaker, is an issue that we need to see how we can address it. Honorable Speaker, the issue of the process, I think the bill has given the process how we can do it. And, Honorable Speaker, we want to thank the Senate for this, because you have seen we had cases whereby some governors left the offices and ceremonially, without even handing keys or even welcoming the new incoming governor to take over. I think, Honorable Speaker, we need also to put a legal, something that can actually force the outgoing governor, to make him bind him so that he cannot leave the office and ceremonially without handing over everything that are needed. Honorable Speaker, he has mentioned about other tools that are supposed to be given to the new or incoming governor. Because some of them, once they have realized they have been defeated and have done a lot of harm to the county government, they disappear like that. So we need to get a way of making them to bind that they will never leave the office or leave the country until he hands over everything to the incoming governor. I think, Honorable Speaker, if you do that one, then we can safeguard the properties of the county government. Honorable Speaker, with those few remarks, I think I support it. Thank you.
Honorable Huru for order, member for Isiro North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important bill. Senate Bill number 1 of 2018 on the assumption of office of county governors, county governor. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Senate for coming up with this important piece of proposed piece of legislation, which is aimed at filling a lacuna in law as far as assumption of office of governor is concerned. Mr. Speaker, the bill outlines a very clear process which guides how a governor-elect is supposed to be sworn in. Mr. Speaker, having witnessed swearing in of 2 governors, those who were elected after 2013 general election and those who got elected last year, you will realize that the period between when a governor is declared to be the winner and the time when they are sworn into the offices, there is a lot of uncertainty and also a lot of issues that take place, which also jeopardizes security of the governor-elect and so on and so forth. I particularly witnessed the swearing in of our current governor. The circumstances which were, the way the function was organized was such that the outgoing governor could not participate because there are no clear provision of who is in charge of making arrangements and who is supposed actually to connect the outgoing governor and the incoming governor. It made it very difficult for the outgoing governor to actually attend the ceremony and hand over the instruments of power. And that happened because we did not have laws which clearly guide the process of handing over and taking over of power by governors-elect and outgoing governors. In this proposed legislation, a committee which is supposed to actually organize the swearing in is clearly outlined. The membership is clearly outlined. And I'm happy that actually the chair has been proposed to be the county secretary. Mr. Speaker, the county secretary is actually the head of public service in our counties. And therefore, the holder of that office actually knows what has been happening in the previous years before the election took place. And actually is the senior-most civil servant, and therefore he can also, because he supervises the chief officers and coordinates also the county executive, the person who holds that office is better placed to actually provide crucial information for the incoming governor. It can also be a very good link between a situation where a governor is voted out and therefore we have an outgoing governor and incoming one. It can actually be a very good link between the two. I'm happy also that this legislation actually requires the outgoing governor to hand over certain instruments of power which are outlined, and therefore this actually obligates the outgoing governor to attend the swearing-in ceremony, and after the new governor-elect is sworn in, to hand over those instruments of power. At the same time, because you cannot rule out, mischief where an outgoing governor can refuse to attend, then there is also a clause saying that, if an outgoing governor has not handed over those, that does not validate the swearing in, which I think also is something which is very important. And then, Mr. Speaker, it is also important that the bill has actually made adequate provisions for the governor-elect to be provided with all the crucial information that he may require, and that a public officer who withholds information requested by governor-elect, according to this bill, actually commits a crime, and the penalty for doing that is also specified. Because you cannot rule out a situation where an officer who have served under an outgoing governor can actually frustrate the governor-elect before he or she is sworn into office. Mr. Speaker, the bill also has made provisions for situations where governor-elects actually dies before the swearing in, and what should happen. And it has also made clear provisions for the timeline within which the governor-elect should be sworn in. There's a specific day and specific days after the election, after the results are officially declared. And this actually helps us to get rid of uncertainties surrounding the swearing in and assumption of office by governors-elect. And therefore, looking at the various provisions of this bill, I'm happy that most of the challenges that we have witnessed when it comes to swearing in of governors-elect, from my own perspective and from the way I've read this bill, are adequately addressed. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Senate and also our own committee for national security for having looked at the Senate bill and also submitting it to this House after going through it and making appropriate amendments on the basis of what they have heard from various stakeholders. And therefore, I support this bill. Thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable Waihenya. You have the floor on this bill as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me an opportunity to support this very important bill regarding the assumption of office by the governor. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the drafters of this bill because they have taken into account the most important aspect of handover to the new governor who has been elected. Mr. Speaker, in the second schedule, it has been clearly outlined that there should be a category of all the assets that the new governor and his county is going to inherit. In the list of assets, Mr. Speaker, it is indicated land, residential estates, staff housing, office blocks, learning institutions, farmland, rented premises and developed land, others, motor vehicles, Mr. Speaker, plant and equipment, furniture, tangible and intangible assets, biological assets, heritage and cultural assets. Mr. Speaker, I'll give an example of the Nairobi City County, where, Mr. Speaker, now almost 1.5 years after we have a new county governor, Mr. Speaker, we still don't have a catalog of all the public land we have. We don't have a roll call of all the assets, of all the landed properties that are owned by the county government of Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, it is sad that since he took over as governor of Nairobi and his county, they have not been able to revoke the titles that were obtained fraudulently by grabbers for public utilities, for nursery schools, for primary schools, for hospitals, and for recreational centers. Mr. Speaker, I would want to ask the County of Nairobi, together with the National Ad Commission, I want to challenge them and ask them, how many titles have they issued for the public schools in the city of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker? How many titles have they issued for the markets, Mr. Speaker? It is sad that even today, Mr. Speaker, the grabbing of public utilities continues unabated. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, you'll find every day hawkers running away from council askaris because the only few markets that are there, which were built decades ago, Mr. Speaker, are filled to capacity, and our hawkers, our traders, our grocers, our Metuba dealers have nowhere to display and sell their wares. Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the governor of Nairobi and remind him that he enjoyed our confidence. We supported him together with his running mate, Polycarp Igathe, and he personally admitted, the governor of Nairobi during the campaigns personally admitted that the deputy governor, his running mate, would complement his abilities and capacities in the management of the city of Nairobi. But Mr. Speaker, after the resignation of Polycarp Igathe, a worthy technocrat who is now heading the Equity Bank, Governor Sogo has not found a suitable man or woman in the whole 4 million population of Kenyans living in Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, we mourn the absence of a deputy governor in this city who can be able to work together with our governor and support his efforts. Mr. Speaker, the work of governor is not simple. It is time-consuming, it is technical, it involves serving many residents, Mr. Speaker. I appeal to Governor Sogo to hasten and honor his promise to the people of Nairobi by picking a man or woman to be his deputy governor, to fill in his shortages and his shortcomings, so that he takes full responsibility for the management of Nairobi City, which generates almost half of the country's GDP. Mr. Speaker, the people of Nairobi are suffering. The Nairobi Regeneration Program, Mr. Speaker, has flushed out all hawkers on the roads, on roundabouts, in open spaces, Mr. Speaker. Where are the people of Nairobi expected to trade? And the government has not built any stalls, has not built any markets. Mr. Speaker, we as the leadership in Nairobi and in the county government of Nairobi, and this appeal also goes to His Excellency the President, who I know is committed to helping solve the problem of shortages of markets in Nairobi, to come up with a quick solution so that we create employment for our people, we create market facilities for them. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I have been in Juakali for a long time. I'm actually a Juakali operator for so many years, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Nairobi don't need markets that they are going to wait for World Bank to build or the city county to build. What the hawkers and operators of Nairobi need is just land. Give us land where we can build our stalls. Traders in Nairobi have capacity. Traders in Wakurima have capacity. Traders in Gikoba, Mr. Speaker, have sufficient resources to build for themselves a market. They need not wait for government. We only need the intervention of government to resolve the matter of the ownership of the land in Gikoba. Then the traders themselves can be able to invest their money in building modern kiosks, modern stalls, to be able to do business. And this goes for all other markets, even in Kiambu, even in Athi River. Create space for the hawkers, create space for small micro enterprises. Give us land, we shall do the rest. We will put infrastructure, we will build. We don't need to wait for donors. We don't need to wait for the ministry. We have resources, we have money. Just point to us, this is the land. Resolve the issues of land in Gikoba, resolve the issues of land in Muthurwa, and give us part of all that land you want to develop for multiple story buildings, like in Pamwani. We create markets. We have capacity in Juakali. Mr. Speaker, I wish to support this bill and plead with the governor of Nairobi, who we respect a lot and who we support, to quickly hasten to appoint a deputy governor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Honorable Ihenya, I allowed you, but you sounded like you are now on a 0-hour session. But nevertheless, you support. Now, in the circumstances and there being no other interest to speak to this, I will call the mover to reply. Honorable Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Administration and National Security.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply and thank the honorable members who have made very valuable contribution. And Honorable Speaker, I also want to confirm to the honorable members that the issue of secretariat and budget is well taken care of in the new amendments. And Honorable Speaker, this amendment should now hold, once completed, governance accountable and transparent. And this amendment, Honorable Speaker, shall bring order in County Assembly. Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply, and thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Well, Honorable Chair, person, now I'll putting question on that particular order until a subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 16, motion, report on Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital Project.
Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Health, Honorable Sabina Chege must be. Her or the vice chair or any other member being absent, that business is stepped down. Very well, honorable members, there being no other business. The time being, all the members, please be on your feet. Honorable Redepe, please be on your feet. Honorable members, the time being 6:47 p.m., this House started adjourned till Tuesday, 4th December 2018 at 2:30 p.m.